I just got done writing up a video script for like a 15-minute long video talking about the upcoming Classic WoW hardcore servers.
Yeah, I
which
did.
are
I did
all
a
but
video like
confirmed,
this
and we
too
can talk
because
about that here in a
it's
minute.
important.
But I'm sort of unhappy with the script, and I just want to do more of a low-key conversational type of video and sort of walk through all of these bullet points with you guys. We're talking about hardcore Classic WoW gameplay rules. But we're going to get there in a minute. First off, the reason I say hardcore Classic WoW servers are all but confirmed, some news broke the other day that the Classic WoW Hardcore Community Council, some of the moderators,
The audio's a bit low.
developers, I think, met with Blizzard and had a talk in the last couple weeks about Classic WoW Hardcore servers. That was a big announcement. Mike Ibarra, who is the president of Activision Blizzard, is now... He's playing Classic WoW Hardcore. He made a Classic WoW Hardcore character, the president of Blizzard. That's a big deal, right? That shows some interest internally. And the other big deal is that Classic WoW Client patch 1.15 has been data mined and confirmed. So Blizzard is definitely doing something. They're making changes to the Classic Client. It's going to be Classic Hardcore servers. I think we're all aware that
we can pretty
at some
much
point in the
that's
next
pretty confirmed.
year, probably 6 months, they're going to be doing hardcore servers, maybe even sooner than that. Fingers crossed.
Hopefully
it's
sooner. Hopefully sooner.
But that opens up the door for a very interesting conversation regarding the hardcore Classic WoW rules.
Right.
Now, of course, so far over the last 3 or 3.5 years, the player base has invented their own rules. And these rules, you're looking at them right now. I think a lot of these rules have been very, very important, actually.
Agreed.
Because we don't have official hardcore servers, right?
Yep.
It's very, given that we don't have official hardcore servers, it's very, very hard to know with 100% certainty who is hardcore, who is not hardcore. It's very easy to cheat or lie or die and then continue playing. And I think it's been a very good idea to have some of these gameplay regulating rules to make sure that every individual's hardcore experience is not being hindered or destroyed by other fraudulent players. Okay, that's a very important thing that's been going on. So I'm a big fan of the rules so far. But if we get official hardcore servers where the gameplay is more structured from Blizzard themselves, I think a lot of these rules we don't actually need.
Interesting.
And I think that hardcore could be way more fun and way better if we actually got rid of some of these rules, given we have actual regulated, defined hardcore servers. So I want to actually talk through all of these community rules with you guys and talk about which ones I think are good and should stay, and which ones I think are bad and should go. So let's just have that conversation.
So I did a video just like this, and I talked about all of these exact rules, and I kind of made the case for why you want some rules, and rules in general kind of create an experience in a game that is fun. And if you have no rules at all, then it kind of sucks, and it kind of ruins the experience in a lot of ways. And if you have too many rules, that also sucks too. But I pretty much think that, I mean, we'll see if we can be convinced by Stay Safe here, but I think that a lot of these rules make a lot of sense in the actual hardcore they release. So let's see what happens. Let's see what Stay Safe says.
The first one is death equals delete. You only have one life,
so
and
obviously
if you die, you must delete your character.
Yep.
Yeah, this is obvious. So this is something that Blizzard would edit the World of Warcraft Classic client to facilitate and monitor. Whereas if you die on the official hardcore servers, you cannot res. I don't even care if you delete your character. I think that's unnecessary. I think it's kind of cool if you can keep your character in ghost form and you can have hardcore ghost parties where it's like a gathering.
I think one of the suggestions too was to have like a log of all the characters that you've leveled, what level they got to, how they died, maybe even a kill cam of how they died, which would be amazing, so you could look back at it in the future. But yeah, having some type of like log, keep them in ghost form, I think is fine. And that's part of the rules here. Leave it as perma-ghost. So I think that'd be cool.
Of ghost hardcore players that have died as time has gone on. That's kind of cool, actually. It's like sort of an RP event. So just disable every single resurrection functionality. Okay, this is battle res, this is soulstone, this is onk, this is whatever normal resurrection abilities. Get rid of all of it. You cannot res. Get rid of spirit res. If you die, you can't res. Okay, I don't care if you delete. Don't make people delete. Let them keep their ghost form, but you can't res. Okay, so that's something that Blizzard needs to internally, infrastructurally do on their end. They need to disable all of those resurrection abilities. That's like the most fundamental piece of these hardcore servers. Moving on. Professions. I'm going to float an idea past you guys. This is what I would love to see. This is really my key point of the video, honestly. So it's important for me to mention this pretty early. I want to see 2 game modes on the official hardcore servers. I want to see
Okay, so the first thing, I want to see what he says, but the first thing, and I briefly talked about this about 10 minutes ago, but if you start segmenting the player base between different game modes, what happens is you have half the community that likes one, you have half the community likes the other, and then you split the community. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's always a bad thing, but it's something to be very wary about. Because if you have a ton of people playing one game mode, it feels alive, it feels poppin', it feels exciting. You can tell your friend I did this and that. But if all of a sudden you split between all of these different game modes, and if it's 2, you know, maybe that's one thing. But then if it's 3, if it's 4, once you start fragmenting too hard, it's like, oh, I'm going to play World of Warcraft. And it's like, well, which WoW are you talking about? And I think that's never a good thing. If you go to your real life friend and said, I did this in WoW, they should probably know what you mean. And if there's too many game modes, it kind of devalues each game mode because there's not one that is inherently valuable, and instead it's split between different styles of gameplay. So, but let's see what he says.
Hardcore game mode where you're able to group, you're able to trade, you are able to use the auction house, you're able to do dungeons as many times as you want, you're able to use the mailbox. All you can't do is die. I want that to be game mode 1 hardcore, where you can't die, but everything else you can do. And there's going to be a tiny little couple stipulations with that, but that's the idea. And then game mode number 2, which is solo hardcore, meaning you are entirely solo always. Of course you can't die, but also you can never group. You can never trade. You can never. In other game modes, this is called solo self-found. Path of Exile has this. Old School RuneScape has this. A bunch of other hardcore game modes in other games have solo self-found. It's a common game term, okay? So I want like kind of multiplayer hardcore, and then I want solo hardcore. And I want you to be able to select which of those modes you want at the character creation screen. That's perfect. And so...
You know, so having said what I just said, I think it's a decent idea, right? Because I think a lot of players come into the stream and they ask, what do I think about this? And not necessarily the professions rule, but the grouping rule down here. Should you be able to group in the outworld? Should I be able to play with my friends? Should I be able to group up for an elite quest? Should I be able to just group up with my friends and level, period? Whether it means grinding mobs, doing any type of quest, whatever. Should that be possible? Should you be able to do that? And then I think the other half the community is saying, like, no, that makes things way too easy. It ruins what hardcore is fundamentally about, and grouping is pretty much lame. Let me say this. If there was only one game mode, I think a solo game mode would be better. Essentially, the way the unofficial hardcore rules are written right now. No grouping, right? If there's only one mode. So if there's only one mode, I think no grouping works better. The reason I think that is because it makes hardcore hard, right? It makes hardcore into more of an experience. It makes hardcore, if you get a green item to drop, you're really excited. It makes it so that you feel like you do need to level professions instead of skipping them altogether. It makes it feel scary and difficult for elite quests, and it makes the world feel immersive, intense, and scary. Now, it comes to the downside if you can't necessarily play with your friends, right? While leveling. What I like about the unofficial classic hardcore rule set is that you can group at level 60, and you can group one time per character per dungeon. So there is a mix currently, and I love the rules that are currently in. So you can't group, right, for quest or elite quest, whatever, but you can run each dungeon once. So that means there's a mixture of solo gameplay and group gameplay, and you have the 60 gameplay. If you make it to 60, then you can try the raids with grouping as well. Plus you get, you know, the role playing and the social experiences without actually asking people for help, etc. So I if it was up to me, I think one game mode, currently how we have it, where you can group each dungeon one time, and in my video I talked about maybe having like a 72-hour lockout, or maybe a 1-week lockout for dungeons. So you could do dungeons on like a 1-week lockout. So it means you can't spam dungeons, but you also have to wait if you want to do them again. But it also means you could do them more than once if you wanted to on like a 1-week lockout. That was my suggestion. Now, if they do Stay Safe's idea where there's 2 different modes, I think both modes are fun and exciting in different ways, the solo mode and the grouping mode. Like I said, my main concern with that is splitting the community a little bit. I don't necessarily know how I feel. Maybe it's a good idea. I think it might be better though to have a hybrid, like I'm suggesting, where you have solo leveling in the world, grouping comes in with a 1-week dungeon lockout, and grouping comes in with raids at level 60.
Under that premise, under that desire that I have, we can talk about these rules through that lens. So professions right now. Under the current hardcore rules on the Classic Era servers, enchanting is a no-go. You are not able to level enchanting because enchanting, you need to make rods, the golden rod, the arcanite rod, and you need to make those with blacksmithing. Well, most people are not going to level mining to level blacksmithing to make rods,
yep.
to drop blacksmithing to level enchanting, and now they have the rods. That's ridiculous. No one is doing it. No one does that. Right now, if you hit level 60, there's a level 60 guild where the trade restrictions are over, and now at level 60, people will level enchanting. But when you're leveling up, no one is leveling enchanting, and it's kind of a shame. So under this game mode proposition that I have come up with, you've effectively unlocked +1 profession. That's another profession's worth of content you can play with while you're leveling, because now you can trade. That's awesome. So the profession thing, you get enchanting under this new game mode that I really think they should do. Talents, that's fine. You can use all the talents you want. Gear and items. So I would love it if there was and I'm gonna talk about gear and items, auction house, and trading, because these are all more economic aspects of hardcore. It would be so cool to have a hardcore economy. Normally, when you're playing Classic WoW, there are botters, there are gold buyers, there are gold sellers. The economy for a long time now, we're all aware, has been kind of... That's one of the reasons why a lot of us like hardcore. If we have official hardcore servers where if you die once, that character is done, it can never resurrect, the whole botting thing is like not an issue. I don't know if you guys know this.
Bots will just die
a lot. They die a lot. You're not going to have Zul'Farrak mage bots. You're not going to have Maraudon bots. You might have fishing bots at the most. And then you report them, and hopefully Blizzard bans them. But outside of that...
That's a great point.
Other bots, are not really going to be manifesting on these hardcore servers. I'm sure people will try, but nowhere near with the same amount of success as they are right now.
The economy would probably be really good, yeah.
It would be so beautiful to have a pristine hardcore economy where you know that every single item, every single silver, every single gold that people are transacting between each other, it's authentic. It's actually from another player. So I would love to be able to sell a green piece of leather gear to a druid that I got on my warrior, and then he trades me 57 silver for it. That's awesome. I think all of us can agree when we're playing hardcore right now on the Classic Era servers.
I mean, I can't deny that would be pretty fun too.
The biggest thing you're missing out on is that social element that has been stripped away necessarily, by the way. I'm not hating on the rules. I think the rules are important given the dynamic we have now, because we're not playing on official hardcore servers. I think.
So I guess just to clarify his point, and I agree, is currently on unofficial hardcore classic, you can't use the auction house and you can't trade. And one of the reasons that you can't use the auction house is because you don't know if an item was posted by a softcore player or a hardcore player. So what the conversation is around the idea, okay, on official hardcore, there wouldn't be any softcore players. There couldn't be any softcore players, and there's less or no botters. So you could actually have a real economy in an official hardcore setting. So it's like, okay, well then should the auction house be allowed? Should mailbox be allowed? Should trading be allowed if every player is hardcore? And it's a great conversation, man. Like, I think Stay Safe suggestion does have a lot of merit, like, the more I think about it, because I think both game modes, the solo game mode is so fun, because when you get a green, it feels amazing, right? And if you get something that you can't use, you vendor it, and, you get some gold, whatever. But being able to trade and having a real economy within hardcore also sounds really fun. So I guess you have a couple options here. You could have two different game modes. You could have one game mode, and if you choose one game mode, it's like, well, do you want the solo game mode or the grouping game mode where you can trade and interact with other players, or do you want the solo one? Or you have the one with the choice, but it has the downside of splitting the community potentially.
I think the rules are important now, but I would love to have more economic and social gameplay on the official hardcore servers, because now we know who's hardcore and who's actually not. So you could be trading gear back and forth. And if you don't want to do that, then don't do it, or play solo hardcore, which is the other game mode we're talking about in a minute. Auction house, would know every single item on that auction house is legit, is authentic, has been farmed by another hardcore player just like you. That's badass. Trading too, same deal. It's all real, and you can help each other level professions. You can trade profession items back and forth. You can enchant each other's gear. You can make potions. You can make armor kits. You can make bandages. You can make food buffs. You can make so many elixirs. You can make so many things that would just really make the hardcore leveling experience blossom and flourish. It would add so much.
I think it's a good point. I think it's a really good point.
Interaction.
Yeah.
You can if you so now we're talking more like social elements, buffs and player interaction, grouping, and dungeons. Let's talk about these three. This tier here.
Okay.
These are social interactions. It would be so nice to be able to group up for elite quests or to do dungeons multiple times if you want. I think probably the most fun part about hardcore leveling right now is the thrill and the rush of going into a dungeon with people maybe you don't know very well. And
Okay, I agree dungeons are great, and a lot of the thrill comes from them. I disagree that you should be able to run dungeons as many times as you want. I think having one run of each dungeon is actually pretty cool because a lot of people grief themselves by just doing the dungeons over and over. And the danger of doing dungeons over and over means that the outworld isn't as populated and isn't as exciting when everyone's instanced inside of a dungeon. Now, there's also a middle of a ground approach here. So you can have dungeons as many times as you want. You could have dungeons only one time per character, or the middle ground that I suggested in my video was talking about, okay, what about having a dungeon lockout similar to ZG of like 72 hours? Or a 1 week dungeon lockout. So that if you wanted to farm a specific drop from Scarlet Monastery, you could, but you couldn't just spam it like 80 times in a row and go from level 30 to 42 and then spam the next dungeon and then the next one and then level 1 to 60 without actually doing any quests at all. I think the 72-hour lockout or potentially a 1 week lockout is pretty nice. I think that would be really, really cool because then you could do the dungeons for the specific drop, but you wouldn't just spam dungeons either.
What's going to happen? It's hilarious. It's drama. That's one of the highlights of hardcore gameplay is doing dungeons. And the fact that it's limited right now, it sucks. So I say open that up, do dungeons. If you want to do elite quests with other people, that's fine, do it. And if you don't do it. Just don't do it, right? It's that simple. And buffs, yeah, it's fine. Who cares? Who cares? Forbidden ability.
I think the idea of just don't do it doesn't make like that much sense. I mean, you can just not do it, but if players are going to do the optimal thing for them to do, like if trading is enabled, people are going to trade. If dungeons are enabled, people are going to dungeon. That's why having a rule set makes a lot of sense. At the end of the day, that's human nature. Like people are gonna, if you have your BIS item that drops from, Meridon, you're gonna probably run it like 20 times to try to get it. That's just like what people do in MMOs. So it's either gonna be restricted or people are gonna spam it. I think the in-between doesn't really exist. So if it's gonna be limited, it should be limited. I think though, one of the reasons dungeons feel so epic and hardcore right now on unofficial hardcore is because they are limited. Like creating that limitation means, dude, you're only doing BRD like once, maybe, if we had a 72 lockout, maybe like twice before max level, and it feels very special and unique, and you want to make sure your group is really good before going, and you definitely don't want to die. I don't know. Let me just say this though too, if dungeons were completely unrestricted, it wouldn't make me like quit hardcore. I don't think it would be the worst thing ever. I wouldn't be like, oh, it's ruined now. I think it would maybe just be a little, maybe a little worse. I don't care that much, I guess is what I should say. There's one rule that matters a lot, and it's this one. A lot of the other stuff, it's like, you could go one way or the other, but I think each person might have their own preferences. It wouldn't kill it for me at all. But, I don't know if it would be quite the same experience.
Abilities and actions. This one is actually quite an interesting component here. I'm going to read through all of these. Warlocks can't resurrect via Soulstone, obviously, because what has to happen before you can Soulstone or Shaman Ankh? You have to die.
Yeah.
So, therefore, you have died. Ankh, Soulstone, you disable those abilities. Blizzard, you disable those abilities, Blizzard. Paladins can't Bubble Hearth. I think you would have to prohibit using a Hearthstone while bubbled. You could probably code that in pretty easily.
Right.
Or you could just remove the max rank of bubble. The max rank of bubble is what, 12 seconds? Get rid of the max rank, and then you actually literally can't Bubble Hearth. There's a couple ways you could approach that. You can't allow Bubble Hearth. It's a free life-saving ability on an hour-long cooldown. It's overpowered. You got to get rid of it. It's uniquely different from Vanish or Feign Death because Vanish and Feign Death can fail. It's not a guaranteed life save. Bubble Hearth is. You got to do something about Bubble Hearth. No using the auto unstuck feature to teleport to major cities. That's good. You can flip that off. I would also get rid of the instance teleport function where you see it all the time where hardcore groups, one person dies, everyone's freaking out. It's every man for himself now, and people start leaving the group because if you leave a group inside of a dungeon instance within 60 or 70 seconds, you get teleported out. Flip that off. That's lame. That's lame. Either you can run out of the dungeon or you're dying. Okay, that's what I would prefer. So flip that off. That's my. Even that though, I really don't care very much about.
I don't care very much either, but you know, that is pretty, like, that's how it was back in the day. Like back in the day, if a run went really bad, you could leave the group and try to run around in circles for a minute and then get ported out. So it is pretty OG. I mean, I don't care one way or the other really, but
what I would do, this is probably the most controversial opinion in this video, I would disable Flask of Petrification. I would delete the item. I think it makes a really, really cringe boring level 60 hardcore meta where people are only going into level 60 dungeons if they've made Petri flasks and there's no risk involved. If everyone's got Petri flasks, then literally nothing can go wrong. It's boring. What you're welcome to disagree. Please, if you disagree, let me know. I just think
I don't know if I have that thought out of a response to that because I haven't hit level 60 yet and I haven't seen the level 60 hardcore meta evolve. So I don't know if my opinion really is fleshed out on that one. So
yeah, I think it is diametrically opposed to the hardcore playset, to the hardcore mindset. That's what I think. Store mounts. There are no store mounts on hardcore servers. I don't even want to hear about store mounts on hardcore servers.
I agree.
Get them out of here. Immortality if you're level 60.
Get them out of here, dude.
You're an immortal. At 60, this is a weird rule. I think this rule is often misinterpreted or it's kind of hazy. Ignore this rule. Even at 60 on official hardcore servers, if you die, you have to delete. Or not delete, but you can't res. Okay? Right. That's of course, that's a given. Right. 60 does not grant immortality. PvP and Battlegrounds. You are free to engage in world PvP, STV Arena, the Gurubashi Arena. Yeah, I'm saying let PvP be what it is. If you want to PvP, if you want to risk dying, if you want to go inside that Gurubashi Arena to try to make your Gurubashi Grandmaster trinket, good luck. Good luck, but you can't complain about it if you die. Have you ever heard of the phrase high risk, high reward? That's exactly what that is. You can't.
Okay, so yes and no. For the way I look at it is PvP should be disabled by default on official hardcore. The reason is because griefers, like people naming themselves Gold Tooth on target macros, you know, people trying to get people to flag. Now, the way I said it should work in my video is PvP is completely turned off on official hardcore servers unless you opt in. And the way you would have to opt in is potentially going to like a main city, talking to someone saying, yes, I want to PvP. Are you sure? Yes. Are you sure you're sure? Yes. And then if you make the decision through multiple dialogue boxes clicking yes, then you can PvP. But I think the idea of just having PvP how it currently is inherently flawed because of griefers. You see it hundreds of times a day on unofficial hardcore that people got killed by griefers. And not just streamers, anyone. And it's like that's important. That's important, Blizzard, to fix, right? That's very important to get right because one bad griefing experience could cause someone to quit. 10, you know, you multiply that by 10 or 100 or 1,000 different times, it's just going to destroy the community. I think this is a really important rule to get straight. To disable PvP by default, you have to opt into PvP. That means if you accidentally right click on a level 1 in stealth on a flight path, you're not going to die because your PvP is disabled. There's multiple ways to do this, right? If you want to right click on the level 1 and instead of auto attacking it, it would say, are you sure you want to PvP? Then you have to click yes, right? So griefing becomes pretty much impossible. I think that is very important. Now, if you want to go into STV Arena event, sure. I'm curious what he has to say about Battlegrounds and other forms of PvP, but I wanted to make that clear that that's important for hardcore to flourish, in my opinion.
You can't try to go for the high risk and then complain. Oh, no, you can't. I got it backwards. You can't try to go for the high reward and then complain about the high risk. That's not fair. It doesn't work like that, okay? No complaining. If you want to risk it for the biscuit, then do it, but no complaining. The other really important thing I wanted to talk about is if you have the regular hardcore game mode, remember 2 game modes, regular sort of multiplayer hardcore and solo hardcore, which I would love to have. You need to have some little restrictions on grouping because you don't want to see a boosting meta where let's say I level a mage to level 60 and I start selling or offering for free because I'm a nice guy boosting services on my level 60 mage.
It's a good point.
And I'm boosting level 20 players in Deadmines.
That's awful.
Well, that's lame.
That's awful, yeah.
That is obviously stupid. So I think you need to have some sort of rule preventing people from
Plus or
grouping up
5
if their
minus levels.
Levels are too disparate. Okay,
Right.
so if you're level 20 and I'm level 60, we can't even join a group. I would
That's a
have
good
like
point.
probably a 10 level leeway. So
That's
if
a
you're
good
20,
point.
you could
Yeah.
be with a 30, but not a 31. Something like that. I think that's a very important rule to have also. But I really, really, really think it'd be a shame to have these official hardcore servers, and we're going to get them. We're going to get them. It'd be a shame to have these official hardcore servers and bring with us these rules that were implemented on Classic Era hardcore servers because we didn't have official hardcore servers. A lot of these rules are completely unnecessary if we have official hardcore servers. To be clear, right now they are necessary. But going into official hardcore servers, I think if as a community we were to bring these rules with us, some of these rules, right, the ones we talked about, it would just take away from the gameplay. And I'm afraid that going forward into official hardcore servers, people are going to say, well, we should just have some of these rules because we've always had these rules. We've always done it, so we should keep on doing it. That's bad logic. Don't do that.
I mean, I think the logic isn't necessarily always we need these rules because we had them, but I think the logic is more these rules were implemented for a purpose over the course of many years by the hardcore community for a reason. And if that reason is to enhance the experience of the hardcore experience, then I think they should stay and they should be good. But if they're unnecessary in official hardcore, then they should go. So I think each one you could talk about separately, but I don't know if I think it might be too big of a generalization to just say, that all of them should go or all of them should stay. I think it's better to look at them in a per rule basis.
Don't think like that. You need to come up with a rule set that is appropriate for the server type that you're on, okay? These rules are good now, but I think a lot of these rules would be bad on official hardcore servers. So I think it's important to have this conversation. But I think I'm probably going to wrap it up. We talked about a lot. Thank you guys very much for listening to me ramble and complain and give my half-baked ideas. I do appreciate it. Please, this is an important conversation to have. So please do drop a comment,
very important,
like the video if you liked it. Send this to a friend of yours so they can watch it and give their feedback on hardcore servers. This is a big deal. Thank you guys very much. Thank you, and as always, stay safe.
Okay, so yeah, it is a very important conversation. I think he brought up a lot of good points. It's interesting. I did a very similar video talking about these rules because I had the same exact idea of like, okay, well, if they're going to do official hardcore, then what rule sets are we going to keep? A lot of the things I talked about in my video is preventing griefing from being possible because that is so pinnacle. And then, of course, like the solo and grouping idea. Now, I am very curious, Twitch chat, what you guys think in terms of /poll. If you could only have one game mode, solo versus multiplayer hardcore, if you could only play one, would you rather have solo hardcore, meaning no grouping, or would you rather play multiplayer hardcore? Or you could play both, right? And that's an option that Stay Safe talked about. And I think it's an okay conversation to have. But if you could only play one, like are more people interested in the solo experience, meaning how unofficial hardcore works right now, right? So you can't actually trade, group for elite quest, etc., or multiplayer hardcore, which is one of the suggestions that Stay Safe had, where you can use the auction house, but keep in mind it's official, so the auction house is only hardcore players, etc. So let's take a look at the poll and see what you guys think, because I think ultimately both game modes would be pretty damn fun. I'm a little nervous myself of having both available though because of the splitting player base problem. Maybe it's not a problem, maybe they should have both, but if you can only have one, I'm curious what people would say. Wow, that is not what I expected. 60% of you want multiplayer hardcore and 40% of you want the solo hardcore. That is definitely not what I expected. I thought more people would want solo. So that's definitely news for me. Well, man, that begs the question. If you are going to only have one, which one would you do? And if you were to have both, and it seemed the thing is the community's split on this. It's a tough decision for Blizzard one way or the other. If Blizzard does solo, half the community is pissed. If Blizzard does multiplayer, the other half the community is pissed. Now, if Blizzard does both and splits the community, so to speak, then the other half of the community is pissed that didn't want the split in the first place. So they're in a pickle. I'm curious what they're going to do. I don't know if I have the answer. I definitely don't have the answer. But it seems like most people want that multiplayer hardcore experience. 57% of you, at least. There it is. We'll see. All right, well, thanks for suggesting that video. I think it's a really good thing to talk about, boys. It is a really good thing to talk about and consider, because we want this done right. We want this done right. You know what I mean?